Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Life in the Wildlands podcast, where we discuss exciting opportunities with outdoor careers, share professional experiences, and provide advice to overcome the hurdles to federal employment. I am your host, Becky Schiefelt, and today we have Isaac Sims, who is a landscape architect with the Forest Service out of Colorado, and he's going to share how he started his career and provide advice for those that want to pursue a career in this type of field. Thanks for joining us today, Isaac. Welcome.
As you said, I'm a landscape architect, and I'm actually right now a mountain resorts landscape architect, which means I'm focusing mostly on mountain resorts, ski areas, doing environmental analysis on one hand and design review on the other, just looking at how they design, build, and giving help where needed, when they need a little help in with design.
So, can you maybe explain to us a little bit more about just thinking about entry-level positions and as a landscape architect? Can you take us on a journey of what it is to be a landscape architect? Because I know for me, when I was working in the Forest Service, I had no idea until I started working with you. And you taught me a lot. So if you could provide a little more information for those that might be seeking an entry-level position, it would be great.
Yeah, as a landscape architect, we focus on design of the outside, like an architect does a building, and we're doing parks and gardens. And as you get to a bigger scale, we're doing zoos or college campuses. And we basically design how they look, where the pathways go, where the trails go, where the signage pops up here and there, where trellises and retaining walls go. And the forest, we get to do it with campgrounds and recreation sites like picnic grounds and trails and waterfront areas along lakes. And I guess, yeah, that explains it.
So, okay, I'm just trying to understand this a little bit more for our audience too, is okay, so you're designing or helping to design like campground, like recreation facilities. So what is as a landscape architect, what is the primary objective in this type of design work?
So when I'm doing landscape design, especially on forest, I'm looking for ways to make what you see out there look like it grew out of the ground. There's places that we all want to go see that are beautiful, let's say in Colorado, Maroon Bells, or where we were in California near Tahoe. People want to see Lake Tahoe, and they come to these areas to use them to recreate. And I would design where people can go and also protect the landscape, trying to protect the place that everybody comes because they love to see, and design a way for people to get around and to see these places without destroying them, but also to enjoy them.
So essentially, you're trying to design these facilities to blend with the natural environment in that specific location so that it's appeasing to the eye.
Yeah, I take my cues from the existing place, what it looks like and feels like, and then use that to create, the way that we get around, the way we move, the way that we stay there, where we camp, but still have that same feel of you came to this beautiful place, and it's still that way.
That sounds like really important work, but to get a full grasp of the importance of a landscape architect, what would happen if there was a campground that was redesigned or built that didn't have a landscape architect for, say, like an agency like the Forest Service or Park Service?
Well, it has happened, and sometimes there are certain things that we look at as landscape architects, and we work with a team of other designers and engineers. Usually we'll work with some engineers to make sure, civil engineers to make sure that the ground and the grading is just right for the drainage or for these roads to be able to be laid on top of the ground. But a landscape architect focuses more on not just the aesthetics, but how do people move and act in space? And so we look at a little bit of sociology in the sense of how it touches the way people interact and the way people use places and how they feel comfortable in places. And without some of that look at a space, you might end up with spaces that maybe we wouldn't put our finger on it and say, oh, look, I could see this is designed badly. You just would say, I just don't feel comfortable over there. Not realizing, it was designed in a way that makes it almost like an amphitheater, say that, there's a circle of cleared area that people are expected to kind of hang out at in the center of all the other places where people are camping and recreating. And it does feel like now you're on stage, you don't feel comfortable anymore. So we would look at little things like that. That's just kind of part of the process of thinking about it. And then we design in a way to help people to feel comfortable in the space and to use the space in the best way.
So it sounds like you, as a landscape architect, you focus on aesthetics. So you're trying to avoid, say, having picnic tables that are painted blue. That would be a complete eyesore and not really blend in with the natural environment, which would look very man-made and uh, go against, we're trying to provide as a federal land management agency and providing a specific experience that's natural. But not only do you do that, then it sounds like what you're also doing with this design is designing these facilities in a way where it concentrates people to avoid more or any resource damage in the surrounding area. So it's like you said, it sounds a lot very psychological, but then trying to engineer and place certain facilities in a way to make sure that the general public is concentrating in the areas that were intended.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point in a way. If we design something like a trail and we don't think about how people use the space, that trail doesn't get used. People will go off trail and you make their own trail that's a much better trail. So ahead of time, we try to think about where and what's the best way to get to places, and then use mechanisms to help people stay out of the places that might damage the environment. Another thing we think about too
Okay.
is accessibility.
Oh, good point. So, for instance, people that might have a disability and the ease of use for these facilities, is that what you're meaning?
Yeah, well, we're all going to be at some point having a more difficult time getting through space. I'm getting closer to that myself. But yeah, making sure that we design in a way that everybody can come in the front door and everybody can enjoy the space. That's and it's called universal design, and that's one of the things that I find really important in designing in the forest.
Absolutely. I think that, I mean, it's just so critical because really, as a federal land management agency, we want the general public, which you said universal, meaning everyone, everyone, to include
Yeah,
all walks of life, can come out into the forest and enjoy the facilities in a safe manner. I think that's really a critical component, and that's one thing I learned in my time with the Forest Service as a recreation program manager is how important that is because we are the government, we are public lands that are for everyone, and so the universal design concept is really key. So what I really would like to know more is how did you get into this? What encouraged you or inspired you to chase this career path?
well, When I first was interested in it, I was a little kid, and I remember going with my family to the Bouchard Gardens in Vancouver, in Canada, and or sorry, Victoria Island in Canada, and we went and just wandered around all these gardens for my grandma to be able to see. She loved the flowers there. My mom said I looked bored, but inside I was thinking, how cool would it be to design places like this for a living? But there's no such job. That's a bummer.
Yeah.
I was
You
8
were
years
just
old.
very concentrated in thought on the future of how the great things you were going to do.
Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know. I wanted to do something outside. I wanted to do something with nature. I wanted to be able to draw. I like art and sometimes listen to music while I was working. And that kind of led me to landscape architecture. And then the Forest Service, I ended up working out of college for a large firm doing big design, big scale city design. And that was pretty cool. But I also had my childhood, I spent a lot of time in the forest. And my grandparents, again, would take me camping to the forest near Tahoe, and we'd hike and we'd swim and we'd play and we'd just kind of explore the woods. So I was really comfortable with that. And I think when a time came that something like that could be a part of my career, I think it felt pretty natural.
Oh, wow. That is an amazing story. So you were in the private industry before as a landscape architect. So what made you decide to leave the private sector to work for the Forest Service?
Well, it was a little bit of carrot and stick. I was a landscape architect during the Great Recession, and a lot of people got their jobs cut, and I was one of them who got laid off. And so I started re-looking for work. And in my search, I actually went to a job fair at my college, and there were some Forest Service folks there, and I talked with them about a job. And again, that was that stick kind of pushed me out. And as I talked to them and I showed them my resume and worked really hard to kind of get into the forest or to get a job, I think that realization of how close I was to the land that felt like, you know what, I this is what I really, really wanted all along.
What are the pros of being a landscape architect for the Forest Service versus the private sector?
Well, I think one of the things that's pretty great is I don't usually work super late nights. But
And you did
I
in the private sector?
yeah, there were a lot of those, but you got to get products out, and so I understand. But
Yeah.
that was one of the things that I really enjoyed though about a Forest Service landscape architecture actually is I got to see full projects from beginning to end, and I really enjoyed full projects where I'm in the room talking and planning and designing at the beginning. I'm drawing up the drawings as to how this thing is actually going to get put together and getting the blueprints completed. And then I'm there when the companies, the contractors are coming out to do the work, and I'm watching and working with them. And if a problem comes up, I'm able to solve it and resolve it again through design. And that holistic approach of design is one of the things that I really enjoy that is it is in the private industry, but there's a lot more for landscape architects in the Forest Service because there's not a lot of us here.
Yeah, it's not the largest profession in the Forest Service by any means. I think the agency could probably use a lot more than what is currently available. So you enjoyed the fact that, I mean, it just sounds really awesome to start a project, do all that design work and then see it implemented and the final product. There must be a really great sense of accomplishment with that.
That is kind of the, I don't know, the adrenaline rush of landscape architecture. It takes a while because it takes a year to design and plan something, and then maybe another year before it even gets built. And then you walk around in the space that you imagined in your mind, and you're walking around with people who are using it and enjoying it, and they're telling you, maybe they know you built it or not, but they're telling you, well, I really love this place. Me and my family, we come here every year, and thought it was going to get ruined when they built it again, but it's better, it's great. And just that feeling of seeing them enjoy it, they don't even need to talk to me, and I just see the enjoyment, and that's pretty great.
Yeah, and it seems really rewarding. And, from my experience working with you on several projects and seeing that end result, and, because people get really upset sometimes when you close facilities down, even though you're, working on a project to help improve them. But so there might be a little, whining with the public when it comes to part of the process, but I think you're right that people really are appreciative and love that aspect, because I know a lot of our recreation facilities across the board, many of them were built back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and there weren't these large RVs back then. And so those facilities weren't built and designed to accommodate the recreation uses that we're seeing today. So I think the work that you do is extremely important. But do you have an experience or two that really is your greatest achievement, or that really made you feel that pursuing a career with the Forest Service as a landscape architect was right for you?
I think a couple of times, I would say, the designing and working on probably the first campground I worked on the El Dorado, and getting to do that, coming from the private industry, and then getting to do that holistic design so that it looked like it grew out of the ground. Working with the contractor, spending days in the forest, that was pretty cool to just kind of make sure I was there to answer questions and see that things were built to the right specifications. I think that one was a pretty great experience for me, and it definitely got me hooked. I wanted to do more and more.
Yeah, because you essentially have left a fingerprint behind when the projects are done. Like, you have touched that facility, and you're a part of making that creation. I think it's super cool. I love it. And I've seen your work in multiple different locations, and it's just phenomenal. And it just looks really nice and really fits, that blending with the natural environment and having that accessibility for or universal use. It's just super cool. But are there any skills that you have acquired with the Forest Service as a landscape architect that maybe you wouldn't have gotten otherwise?
Yeah, I think the biggest for landscape architects is we in the forest do this analysis for the environment called scenery analysis, using a thing called the scenery management system. So it's a system of understanding what a place looks like, and then what changes happen if we take a management activity on it. So, example, if we're going to cut some trees to thin, maybe for fire protection or something, in the planning and development of that, I would look at and see what kind of changes this would make to the scenery based on, what they say they're going to do. And so I'll look at the changes and then rate it in a way that can let the public know, because it's part of a public process for the public to see and be okay with or not okay with, and let them know how much change is going to happen to this place. Is it going to be significant, or is it going to be a small change that really looks the same? Is it going to be a new square cut out in the forest, or is it going to meander and scallop and look like the existing forest, like it's just an opening in one of many other openings that happen in the forest? Again, that grown out of the ground to make it look like it's always been that way.
So you're, yeah, avoiding eyesores potentially on that forest landscape, and trying to do that analysis of, we have a project, and how is that project going to potentially affect the larger landscape? Is that what you're meaning?
Yeah, it's almost like applying what's called place-based design to forest management and using the same tools that we use as landscape architects or as architects or as artists, using design elements and design principles to quantify changes. The same thing also is what I do with mountain resorts as they're planning on cutting things out and moving things around, and how do we make the changes that they do be the most natural possible. And it's a little harder in such an urban space, but we still try
Right.
to do that because of, as I tell them, hey, the people are coming here. They're not coming here because just for skiing. While you could build a building in any big city and put skiing inside, artificial snow and ski inside there. But people come to the
Mhm.
woods because that's where you really want to be doing your favorite activity, is whether it be mountain biking, hiking, or skiing out in the woods, out in the forest. And so we try to make the designs lead people's eyes back to the forest as opposed to inwardly towards the most urban spaces.
Wow, it sounds like a lot of factors that are play into all the design work that you do. I'm really in awe of your profession, Isaac. I just think it's great, and it's very essential, to provide the best quality public service that we can through, the work that you do in designing these facilities to make it aesthetic blending with the natural environment, making it accessible to everyone, and in
This,
factoring in psychology of the people that are visiting these special places. It's really cool. So, because I do know that you have a degree in landscape architecture, right? You have a bachelor's
mhm,
degree.
yeah.
And is there opportunities for other folks that school may not be their, thing, where they not want to or afford to pursue a degree in landscape architecture? So is there opportunities for people to get in without a degree?
You know, it's not strictly a degree job, but it is super helpful to have one. I think you can be a landscape designer without a degree, and you can do landscape design in many different jobs. You can apprentice your way in through landscape design with firms that have landscape architects. So if you do I can't remember the amount of years, it's 5 or 6 years of working under a licensed landscape architect, and you can apply to get a licensed landscape architect. As far as in the Forest Service, the path to becoming a landscape architect, I would say that's a little more difficult. Not impossible, but a little more difficult. And not to do some of the landscape architecture work, scenery management, people do that are not just landscape architects on the forest, but it helps to understand the design elements and design principles that you would learn through landscape architecture. If it's going into building and designing facilities, I think that the hiring is focused on degrees of landscape architecture. I think in the past, people could kind of apprentice their way up to the landscape architecture job. But
Hmm.
more recently, I think people will come in, and if they aren't a landscape architect and they're interested, they might concurrently go to school while they're working for the Forest Service to get a degree for landscape architecture to apply for jobs in the 807 series, which is the landscape architect series. I personally came into it backwards also. I was a landscaper first before I became a
Uh-huh.
landscape architect, and I dug the ditches and planted the trees and mowed the
Uh-huh.
lawns and put
Yeah.
in and installed landscapes, and then went into design, and that helped me pay for my way through college as well. But
And so you
and
like you literally worked from the ground up then.
yes, absolutely, that is true. So coming
Which
from
is
it from
important.
that
It's
other
That's
way,
important
yeah,
though, I think. If you're going into a career with the Forest Service, having that experience from the ground level where you're not really involved with planning and all the design work that goes into recreation and facilities, that it brings a different perspective. And I think it's really important, that something that people should keep in mind instead of trying to climb the ladder to management is spending time on the ground and getting that experience that will give you a skill set moving forward in your career, and not just with landscape architecture, but
hmm,
recreation and a plethora of other professions that work for land management agencies. So I think, do you feel that the experience as, on the ground, being the landscaper, what do you think helped you be a better landscape architect with that experience?
you know, when I'm working with other landscape architects, especially when I was working in the private industry, we would design stuff in AutoCAD, and AutoCAD can is a drawing program for making blueprints for designs, and it's very precise. You can get down to, less than the millimeter of measurement when you're drawing these things with the straightest of lines. And as we were doing that, we'd lay them out and we'd work really hard to make sure everything was kind of perfect in the drawing. And then I also would point out, once they hand it to the guy with the shovel, he has to dig through however hard this dirt is and however tired they are at the end of that day of digging these 10 holes for 10 trees in this line. If they are, within 6 inches instead of 1 millimeter, they're going to be okay with that. After
Yeah.
having dug at all the holes myself. So, not to get too caught up in some of the precision, and especially in forest design, there's a little bit more leeway for the precision as opposed to between two buildings in a city where you have, those exact dimensions and then a skyscraper on either side. You're not going to be able to go outside of those dimensions. So just learning how to,
Interesting.
understand that people were there doing this work that we were doing, and that
Yeah.
our pursuit for perfection may be with a grain of salt of understanding that people are going to build it and people are going to live in it.
Right. Yeah, so I think that's great because you're taking your experience and putting that perspective of being the person that's on the ground doing the work and factoring that into your design work. So I think that's incredible. Would you have any advice for anybody that would like to pursue a career with landscape architecture?
Yeah, I would say what would be really helpful, if you enjoy that, if you enjoy people, if you enjoy the art, bring your talents in. Landscape architecture is not solely one talent. It can be science based too, because we look at engineering and we look at soil sciences. How how's that going to affect plants? So there's a lot of avenues. And in my experience, landscape architects have come from all kinds of backgrounds. Some have been teachers before and then came into landscape architecture from teaching English. And some have been, like me,
Wow.
digging ditches. And
That's a career change.
yeah, yeah, in a sense too. But you get the opportunity to teach people through the designs. Some are interpretive trails that we do on forest. And so there's a whole lot of skill sets that bring great things to the table for it. So if you find that it seems really cool, you know, bring that talent along too. You learn the other stuff that help you to design it better, and you bring this unique vision that I think really makes the job interesting continually and makes for interesting and beautiful places that stimulate all of us. Becky has got the knowledge and has been there. And I think that, you know, life in the wildlands, I was so excited finding out that that was a thing that you were going to do, Becky. Very excited to find out that,
Thank you.
because I had a very difficult time. And while I say, I had to have this circuitous route to get to my job in the forest, it took me over 6 months of writing and rewriting my resume and not getting it right and trying again and not getting it right. It's
Yep.
actually longer
The
than six
struggle is
months
real.
if I look at all the other times I tried in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I tried when I was 19 too and didn't get in then either. Had to wait until in my mid
Yeah.
30s. But yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
the work and the help that comes through life in the wildlands can really, get your foot in the right path and maybe avoid some of the failures that I did in my path trying to get here.
You and many others, my friend. Thank you so much, Isaac. It's been a pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you
And
very
thanks to
much.
our audience for listening in. And I'll see you next time. For more stories about outdoor careers, subscribe to the Life in the Wildlands podcast, where I will be interviewing outdoor professionals to discover exciting opportunities in outdoor careers, share professional experiences, discuss the hurdles to federal employment, and provide advice on how to overcome these challenges. And if you're interested in outdoor jobs and don't know where to start, or if you already are a federal employee with an outdoor career that's struggling to make it to the next level in your career development, Life in the Wildlands can help you on your journey. Check out our career counseling and federal resume development services at www.lifeinthewildlands.com or call 406-848-1660.